Hashtag real talk. I'm going to share with you the 3 biggest mistakes that I made in business. And I could tell you who likes to talk about their mishaps. But hopefully what I'm about to share with you will help you to avoid the mistakes that I made that cost a lot of money, that wasted a lot of time, and that impacted my relationships, and to help you to avoid the common traps that I see out there over and over and over again in business. And who knows, maybe you've already mastered these. Maybe you're not going to go down the same path. But let's get into them anyways, because I'm sure there'll be some value that you'll be able to extract from some of these stories. Number 1, when I was starting out in business, I started my first company from my sister's garage. I was 16 years old. I grew a landscape business from nothing into a multi-million-dollar business. I had no clue how to read financial statements like the income statement, the balance sheet, and statement of cash flows. I was just relying on sheer grit and hard work. And guess what? I made a ton of mistakes and left a lot of money on the table. But the biggest mistake, that wasn't it. The biggest mistake that I made was not the financial literacy piece. That was a big hindrance. But the actual mistake that I made was not focusing on the quality of my revenue. Let me explain. Our company was set up from the beginning to do landscape design build services. So we'd go out to new homes or existing homes, and we would design these landscapes with features such as patios, fire pits, putting greens, outdoor kitchens, waterfalls, ponds, etc., etc. These beautiful outdoor spaces. And we would design them, and then we'd go install these features into people's yards. All right, that was our business, design and build. So we were just in the construction space, new construction and existing construction. But when it came to maintenance of those properties, I was always like, maintenance is for the birds. I don't want to get out there and mow these properties and pull weeds and prune flowers. Instead, I'll leave that to other companies. So instead, my business was highly focused and concentrated on new construction and renovations. Well, guess what? My business wasn't reoccurring. So I would go out there and install a new landscape for a homeowner or for a builder or for a commercial property. And that would be great for that time period. But then that homeowner wouldn't call me for another 5 or 7 years until they bought another house. So it's not like it was recurring. Now, sure, sometimes they would hire me the next year to come back and put in a pond, or they'd hire me to put in lighting later on. So there was a recurring element to it, but we weren't maintaining those properties like other companies that were more integrated, that were offering both construction and maintenance services. Well, I didn't think it was a big deal because the economy was going gangbusters, the housing market was on fire, and our revenue continued to skyrocket year after year. Well, guess what? Fast forward to the financial crisis of 2008, 2009, and a lot of our projects got canceled because we were working in the high-end residential market. That was where the majority of our revenue was coming from. Well, think about it. The people that were spending $100,000, $200,000, $500,000 on their landscaping, when the financial markets started to melt down, they got kind of spooked. So some of them called up and said, look, let's put our project on hold, or let's skimp back on the original plans for our home. So that impacted our revenue significantly. We saw our revenue drop, and it was super painful. Looking back, I should have focused on building out our maintenance division because that would at least give us, sure, as lower margin, but more stable revenue. So when I talk about focusing on the quality of revenue, I would, in your business, if you're not doing this already, if I could do it all over again, I would build a customer base where I had some sort of recurring revenue, sticky revenue. And if you could get customer lock-in and this recurring revenue, then you could build a business that's super attractive, easier to scale, and it's not going to require as much capital. So that was the biggest mistake that I made. Like I said, if I would have focused on this, I would have made my business more recession-proof. That was a big, big mistake. The second mistake that I made, which goes back to my earlier comment about financial literacy, I didn't pay attention to invested capital. Now, invested capital is a combination of working capital, less excess cash and interest-bearing debt. So it's your current assets minus your current liabilities, excluding those 2 items, and your net property, plant, and equipment, which is your property, plant, and equipment off your balance sheet, plus your accumulated depreciation, netted out, and that gives you your net PP&E. So I didn't pay attention to my invested capital. Now you may wonder, why is that important? It's important because that's the amount of money that is required to keep your business going. So I had to buy trucks and tractors and trailers and all types of equipment to keep my landscaping business afloat. Also with working capital, there were times where we didn't pay attention to it as well as we should have. So our accounts receivable climbed, and that really hurt our cash flow. So this is a mistake that I made early on, and I see it consistently being made across a ton of companies that I work with. And if you look at your net operating profit after tax and you divide that by your invested capital, you will find your return on invested capital. And the reason why this is so important is because that money that is in invested capital is essentially trapped in your business until there's some type of liquidity event. Now, I didn't understand that early on, and therefore I let my invested capital grow faster than the profits that I was generating, and it really hurt the value of my business and just our ability to remain liquid, and it impacted our leverage and everything else. So I would highly recommend looking at your invested capital. And for me and my business and the companies that I work with, I always go in there and I determine what is the invested capital base, what is the return on that invested capital, and how can we make improvements along the way. So that was mistake numero dos. That doesn't even have an accent. I didn't even roll my R. Let me say that again. Numero dos. All right. Maybe that gives it a little bit more justice. Sorry for you who are listening and you're like, I can't hear that. It's terrible. A white boy trying to speak Spanish. Okay, let's get into mistake number 3. And this is more personal, and this had an impact on my relationships. Let me share this with you. When I was the CFO of a company out in Chattanooga, I was out there to turn around this business. It was $1 billion company, and we had an office building, and we had employees on multiple floors. It's a 4-story building. My office was this corner space on floor 4. Oftentimes I'd park in the parking lot, come in, go up the elevator, go into my office for the first meeting. And it was just after that, it'd be meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting. That was my day. And it was just crazy, hectic, just, in this world. That's the world that I lived in. There's so much going on and so many demands on my time that I didn't prioritize the people. That was my third mistake. Not focusing on my people as much as I should have. Now, obviously, as a CFO, I had a team of 40 accountants underneath me. And so I worked with them and I coached them and I mentored them and I did the best that I could. But when it came to the rest of the company, I'd say a terrible job. All right, to be honest, I did a terrible job. Now, our chairman at the time, he was excellent. He would come in, he would walk the floor every single morning. He'd whistle, he'd say hello to people, he'd ask them about their dog. And he was just very, very personable. And I learned from this over time. So at first I was terrible. I got better. Okay, I got better. That's the good news. But one night, this really, really impacted me. The lights were out. It was late. And I was the last person in the building because I just had a ton of things on my plate. And I decided to walk floor 4. And then I went down the stairwell and I just walked floor 3 to make sure that nobody else was there and to just say goodbye if they were. And during the process of walking on floor 3, I went by each office. There's office after office after office. This is a big floor, it's a big company. And in these offices, when I walked by, I noticed on the wall were pictures of their kids and their families and so on and so forth. And I went to one office, I was like, they got a great looking family. I went to the next office, thought the same. And then it really hit me. And I stopped trying my tracks. And I thought, wow, I have a fiduciary responsibility as the CFO of this company to take care of the finances of the business, to keep the business financially fit in order to provide for all these families. And that weight was tremendous on me. I could tell you it was a very difficult time in my life. And I had to make a bunch of tough decisions on behalf of the company to save the overall company, right? But nobody knows that. Nobody knew what was going on behind the scenes, and that's fine. But I could tell you, that moment hit me and I realized and I became, sad and I overcome with sorrow because I felt like I wasn't out there enough with the people and I wasn't building the relationships that were required in order to show people, hey, I care about you and the company cares about you and you're valued. So that night on, I decided, look, I'm going to change things. I'm going to do things differently. And that's when I started walking around more, spending time with people, canceling some of the meetings, focusing on the most essential, which was relationships with the people. But I could tell you, looking back, and all the time that I wasted by not investing in my people was mistake number 3. So that's what I learned. And in the businesses that I'm working in now and in my company, I'm not perfect. Okay, I'm definitely not perfect. Sometimes I become busy, demanding, Steve, and I have high expectations. But I'm trying to build better relationships with people because it makes all the difference in the world. And I see this across multiple companies. Sometimes business owners are so busy, they're so caught up in meeting after meeting after meeting, that's where I was, that they don't take the time to invest in the people that are right around them. And when I started doing that, everything shifted. Attitudes started to shift. The culture started to become more inclusive, more strengthened, and just more fun. So that was a big mistake that I made that I definitely don't want to repeat as I move forward. But those are the 3 mistakes that I made in business. That's what I wanted to share with you today. So thank you for your time and for tuning in. And until next time, take care of yourself. Cheers.